Hello, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here tonight. So my story is not unique, much like we've heard tonight. There's a lot of similar experiences that I went through, but I suppose the irony is that we all felt like we were the only ones that wore hearing aids or that were deaf. So my, I guess, journey into hearing loss began when I was 3 years old. My mum noticed that I wasn't really speaking and that I had started to look at her lips when she spoke and was sort of mimicking her mouth. And they took me to an audiologist, and turned out that I had a very severe ear infection, and they thought that maybe I just needed to get grommets and then it'd all be fine. And so I got grommets, and turned out that I did have a hearing loss. It was permanent, and at the time it was mild to moderate, and I guess I don't really have any memory of it, but every year after that I would have to get my hearing tested. My parents were told that I would eventually need hearing aids. Those days they didn't think it was necessary to give a child that had a mild to moderate hearing loss hearing aids, whereas now they certainly do. And I suppose it was quite a negative experience for my parents. My mum was told that I wouldn't be a party girl, and obviously she was quite devastated by this idea that her child wouldn't for some reason, because she had a hearing loss, wouldn't be social. But for me, the painful experience really began when I was 10 and I was fitted with hearing aids. Obviously, up until that point, I thought I was managing just fine, even though I did have to get my hearing tested every year, which I did not enjoy. It wasn't something that I had ever kind of considered, this idea that I was deaf and that I would have to kind of face this world of wearing hearing aids. It was something that I associated with elderly people. I would sit there in the audiology centre and see images of old people or babies. I'd be sitting there with old people sitting there next to me. And it's sort of I had this idea that there wasn't anyone young out there with hearing loss. And so, of course, I felt incredibly ashamed and isolated. And at that time, I also had to see a special needs teacher. And so I was actually quite competent at learning. I was very quiet, and my mum was also a primary school teacher and then became an ESL teacher. So she, without me knowing, obviously helped me quite a lot. And so when I had to see a special needs teacher and she walked into the room, I think in my head, I'd probably been given the hearing aids that week, and they were, big and chunky at the time. And, I was quite horrified by having to wear them. And she walked in, and was like, "Oh, I'm here to see Kate." And I'd have to get up and walk out of the room. And, I was an intelligent child, but in that moment, I was just like, I must be an absolute idiot. I'm having to walk out and see this special needs teacher. There's obviously something wrong with me. And we'd go to this other room in the school and we'd sit down, and she made me do these little exercises. And I clearly remember one of them was, I had a piece of paper and I had to draw the things that she said. And so it was, put a triangle in the left square of the page. Now draw a line from the top of that triangle to the right top side of the page. And I just sat there thinking, what's wrong with me? Why do I have to do this? Is this this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, so therefore I must be stupid. And from that moment, I sort of, sorry if there's noise out there. I feel like my partner and stepchild are making a bit of noise. But basically from that moment, I got this idea that I was never going to be very smart, that I wouldn't be good at reading and writing, that I would never be good at English, that I wouldn't be good at language. And while I never said anything, I spent basically the next 15 years feeling that way. All through high school, I was always trying to get the smaller hearing aids. I always thought every time I would get a new pair that this time I'll start wearing them and feel comfortable wearing them. And, you know, it started off with innie ones, and then they got even smaller innie ones. And I thought, surely now I'll feel comfortable wearing them. You can't even see them. And no matter what, it did not change anything to how I felt. I still would not wear them. I'd wear them in the classroom and then take them out the minute I left the classroom. It was something that I just thought, okay, well, I'll use it to help me learn, but then socially, there was absolutely no way I would want people to see them. I ended up studying visual communications. I suppose I thought that my hearing loss was the reason why I was drawn to the visual medium. And then I later became a photographer. And I never, up until basically I was 26, I felt incredibly ashamed by my hearing aids. I wouldn't tell people about them, much like we've heard tonight. I thought that people would think I was less competent. I didn't think it was glamorous. I thought people would find me unattractive if they saw them on me. And then all this changed in a matter of minutes when I was 26 and I was reading Frankie magazine, and I just stumbled upon an article by a young woman who was the same age as me, and this short story was about her experience with deafness, being deaf, and also a photographer. And I basically just broke out in tears, and reading her story was the first time I had read about the exact things that I had felt. And it basically just shocked me so much, because I couldn't believe that I had got to that age and I'd never read anything that was not only my story, but for the first time, it actually seemed interesting. In that magazine, that story had value. And I thought, wow, this is so fascinating. Why have I never thought that my story was fascinating and worthy, and that it could be in a magazine? And that feeling basically shifted my whole perspective, but it also made me think, imagine what I could do with a project that shared so many stories like this. Imagine if I had been given a book when I was 10 years old, being given hearing aids, and someone had just handed me a book filled with these beautiful stories of people with all different kinds of experiences of deafness, and that it looked good, that it was beautiful, that these stories had value, and it showed hearing aids and it showed cochlear implants and Auslan, how different my journey might have been, and how different the journey of so many other people out there could be. And so that was basically the beginning of a 5-year journey to make that book, which I did end up making into earshot. But it was just a photography project in the beginning. And I basically started just meeting people, putting things out there to try and get people to participate, their stories to share. And I didn't know anyone else who was deaf before that. And it opened up this whole world, because it meant that I could search for people, meet people all over Australia that had hearing loss and deafness, and in the process just learnt so much about it. But it also forced me to wear my hearing aids and feel proud of my hearing aids. I remember starting the project and thinking and going off to meet, one of the subjects. And I would always just have the hearing aids in my bag, and I would only bring them out in situations where I felt that, I needed them. And in that moment, I was like, well, how could I be doing this project as a deaf person needing hearing aids and not wear my hearing aids? And so that was basically the kind of catalyst for me wearing hearing aids. And now, the idea of not wearing them now is just absurd. And the idea of feeling ashamed of them or worrying what people would think is now such a distant kind of feeling. But I don't know, what would have happened if I didn't read that magazine, find that article. I believe my time is probably up, and I think there's a lot of great conversations that we can now have